It is so easy to get burnout on day-to-day tasks and just life in general. Come spend the day in the kitchen with me as I catch up on some baking and finish some upkeep in the kitchen. Earlier this morning, I had some errands that I had to run in town, so after I got back, I immediately started putting away dishes. We try and make sure that all the dishes are done the night before. It just feels better, and you walk into a blank, clean space in your kitchen and just ready to start the day. So that's how I like to start my day, is by putting dishes away. As you guys know, if you saw my last few videos, we have been busy in the dining room trying to get that finished. We still have not finished the ceiling or the trim. We're still waiting to hear back from the guy that is working on our tractor, but staying up to task in here in the kitchen is incredibly hard, especially whenever you're trying to do renovations. So we still eat at home, cook 3 meals a day, and as soon as Ben gets home, then we start working on the dining room or whatever else needs done, because we do have a farm. If you're new to my channel, we have 34 acres and we have a pig, we have several cows and chickens that we have to take care of. So we do try and do the feeding and stuff before dark. So after that, then we will come inside and then usually get started. Since it is winter, the farm does not require near as much work, and it's just, you really can't do much. It's a sloppy, muddy mess most of the time. So it does allow for us to take a break from the farm side of things and to really focus on renovations. But I think it's maybe our personalities, but if we work too long on something, we really get burnout. So the past few months, we've been focusing on this dining room, and I can tell both of us are starting to lose motivation and steam, and we've reached that point to where we just want to get the dining room done and completed, and we are already wanting to move on to the pantry though. So we're not losing motivation for all renovations, but just for the dining room, just because we've worked on it for so long and we are ready to get it done. But since the dining room is now decorated and we are at a standstill on the trim and stuff, it is time to catch up in here in the kitchen. And the one thing that I have learned since doing renovations is I have to usually spend 1 day a week in the kitchen catching up and trying to meal prep just a little bit. So it's only me and Ben. Ben is my husband if you're new here. But he works a full-time job, so usually for lunch and stuff, I'll just snack around, but he is gone for almost 12 hours a day, so he does need a full lunch packed. And instead of trying to make it every single night, I do make a lot of things that all on this one day that he can take for the entire week. So right now I am making tea, and he'll usually take a glass of this and drink it at work, and then you'll see later in the video that I do meal prep some cake for him to take because he requested cake this week, and some biscuits. So we usually have biscuits on the side for our meals a lot of the times, or he will eat them for breakfast also. This is the easiest way that I have found to stay ahead of a little bit, just because whenever he comes home, I don't want to spend my entire evening in the kitchen. I like to go out and help him do whatever he needs done. And then also, if we're working in here in the house, I want to be able to work on that. So during the day, I do a lot of cooking, and also that's whenever I create all the content for you guys on here and on Instagram and the blog. So really during the day, it's my time to catch up in the kitchen, but also catch up on work. But the first thing I'm going to do is start by making Ben's chocolate cake. So he is a really big cake fan, and I am not, but he requested it for this week so that he could take it for lunch with him. So I'm going to be making that. And this recipe is not up on the blog yet, but I'll go ahead and tell you guys here what it is if you want to write it down. It will eventually be up on the blog, and I'll link it down below. So if you're watching this later, then maybe it is linked down below by now. But it is 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups granulated sugar, 3/4 cups of cocoa powder, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of milk, 1/2 cup of lard melted, and you can also use vegetable oil, but we don't use vegetable oil in our house, so I use lard and I melt it. 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon of vanilla, 1 cup of boiling water, and then also you'll need spray oil just for greasing your cake pans. Now that my water is warm, I'm going to go ahead and start making my sourdough bread, and I'll just start it today and then it'll go in the fridge for overnight and I will bake it. But I am working on testing out some different sourdough methods, so if it works out like I hope it does, then I will share a whole YouTube video on that, but I'm not sure if it's going to work yet, but I'm hoping it does. If it does, then I guess you will see a video on it, and if it doesn't work out, then I guess there will be no video, but fingers crossed it does work. One thing you may notice in this video is that I am constantly back and forth between different recipes that I'm working on and just trying to heat up water or making the tea, whatever I'm doing, just because I do not like to just stand around. So while I'm waiting on my bread to proof or something else to happen, then I like to always be doing the next thing. So if you're not one step ahead, then you feel like you're spending the entire day in the kitchen, and I am spending the whole day in the kitchen, but I feel like I'm getting more accomplished just because I'm not standing around playing on my phone or watching TV or anything like that in between the waiting steps. So during baking, there are quite a few waiting steps or waiting periods, whether you're waiting on something to bake or waiting on something to finish. So during that time, I always move on to the next thing. I don't just wait around. And if I don't have anything to do, then I'll start cleaning up the kitchen. And as you'll notice, I try and do the dishes in between every single recipe, just because if not, I get so overwhelmed with the mess that I just cannot function in my own kitchen. So I do have to clean up as I go, and it just simplifies it at the end of the night, just so there's not so many dishes to do at once. But if there is anything that I've learned from over the years of just cooking or baking in my kitchen or canning, whatever I'm doing, it is that you have to find a rhythm that works for you. And my mom does not do her kitchen the same way that I do. So she does it completely different, but she is still efficient in her housework. But I do it completely different than her, but yet I'm still efficient in mine. So there are different ways to get things done. You just have to find what works for you. And I don't have kids, so if you have kids, then you're probably going to spend more time tending to them, and that's what you'll be doing in between your breaks of waiting on something to rise or waiting on this or that. You're probably going to be tending to your kids, so you may not get as much done, but I don't have kids yet, so I can just focus on this. So if you do have kids, this is all to say, just do not compare yourself to me, because I do get that message a lot, but I don't think people realize that I do not have kids. So you should never compare yourself to anybody else, but in the case of like trying to mimic somebody else's housework or what they get done in a day, it is good to find somebody that is similar to you. So find somebody, if you have kids, then find somebody that does have kids. And if they're a stay-at-home mom, then find somebody that their husband works out of the house, but they are a stay-at-home mom and they're still trying to get all of it done. So just try and find somebody that is in a similar life stage to you, and that doesn't even have to be an influencer, because I know so many influencers that play it off that they are doing all the work themselves, but behind the scenes they have 10 employees, no joke, some of them have 10 employees working for them, and they may just film the content, or they don't even have to take care of their kids. While they're filming content, they have somebody taking care of their kids. Maybe their husband is taking care of their kids. I have no idea. But just don't compare yourself, and especially to big influencers, because it's not always practical and it's not all that it's cracked up to be. So all that to say, just find somebody that maybe just a friend or somebody that is in a similar life stage to you, but please don't compare yourself to me, because this is just a video. It's a day in my life and it is sped up. There's a lot of clips cut out. And I never want to make anybody feel like bad about themselves just because they're not getting near as much done as me in a day. This isn't practical. Like, I don't do this every single day. I do this once a week, and so that I don't have to work this hard every other day of the week. But my hope is that these videos can encourage you, or maybe you do housework along with me or cook a meal along with me. Since I was going to be making cookies also, I needed to open a jar of this sugar because we were completely out of brown sugar, and I never really keep brown sugar on hand. I keep it in the pantry, but I don't buy it from the grocery store. So we like to only use organic cane sugar, and you can look up the differences between like white sugar, like granulated sugar, and organic cane sugar, but we just think that organic cane sugar is better. And so I keep molasses on hand to make the brown sugar. So I just don't measure, I just pour it in, and it does get kind of messy. So if you are somebody that cannot stand to get your hands messy, then probably try a stand mixer. I'm sure that you could do this in a stand mixer, but I never have. I just always mix it with my hands until I get it to the color that I like. Some people like light brown sugar. I prefer dark brown sugar, especially in my cookies. So that is what I'm trying to make here, and it always works really well. And I do have an airtight container that I keep it in the pantry, so it never gets hard or like clumpy or dried out or anything like that. So that is how I make my brown sugar. You guys have seen me make chocolate chip cookies on here many times before, so instead of telling you guys the recipe or walking you guys through the steps this time, I will just link the recipe down below. So if you've never watched my videos before, I do have a blog, and I do try and share the majority of all my recipes over there. Sometimes they're not up yet by the time I post a YouTube video, so just check back in a couple weeks if I share something in this video and the link is not down there. I always try and link it in the description box, but my cookie recipe is already on the blog, so I'll have that link down below if you want to check it out. And there is a free printable on there. You can just print out the recipe and follow along that way. One of the most important parts of making a cake, and especially if you're going to be making a tier cake and you're going to be taking it out of these containers, is do not remove the cakes from the containers or the cake pans, whatever you want to call them, until it is completely cooled. Usually they need to set for at least 30 minutes and sometimes even longer. This day I did not let mine cool long enough and the edges did stick. So you may see that later in the video whenever I'm icing the cake. So since I was making a cake for Ben, I did go ahead and make cookies for myself, but instead of going ahead and baking them, just because we are the type of people that will eat cookies one day, but we don't really eat the leftovers, so they usually end up going to waste or they go stale before we can eat them, just because it is just me and Ben. So what I decided to do was make a batch of cookies, but I put them on a small plate, and if you have more room in your freezer, I would totally suggest doing a sheet pan or something larger, just so that this process can go quicker. But we actually had our hog butchered, I think it was 2 weeks ago, so our freezer is completely full, and I only had a small flat section that I could put this plate on to flash freeze these cookies. So that is what I'm doing here. I did lay down a piece of parchment paper, and I'm going to flash freeze them for about 20 minutes, and then I will pull them back out, as you can see here, and put them into a Ziploc bag, and I do label it. I just do this so that if Ben wants to make cookies, he knows how to do it. Usually anything that I put in the freezer, I'll write instructions on. So this is just raw cookie dough. These are unbaked cookies, so they need to bake at 350 for 15 minutes. So if you usually use my cookie recipe, I think they bake for 8 to 10 minutes. I think I usually bake mine right at 10 minutes and they come out perfect every time. But if you want them to come out still like the gooey texture that I like, the chewy kind, then bake these frozen for 15 minutes. And then if you want them crispier, of course go longer, but I like mine to be a chewy cookie. When you do go to bake them, just put them directly onto a baking sheet that has parchment paper on it. That's what I usually do. And then place them in a 350 degree preheated oven and bake them for 15 minutes. It's super easy, and this is the only way we can do it without a bunch of cookies going to waste or them going stale before we can actually eat them all. After I do my stretch and folds on my sourdough bread, then I do start putting my tea in a mason jar. So this tea is actually not just straight tea. It is a very concentrated tea syrup. So this recipe is on my blog, so I will have it linked down below for you guys. But Ben takes a glass of sweet tea every single day to work, and he drinks it with his lunch. So I do try and make sweet tea at least once a week, and I try and keep it, just because if he has to stop at a gas station and buy a bottle, it is very expensive. I think it's like $2 and some change a bottle. And also, we don't know what is in that tea. So this is just water, sugar, and tea. We use black tea, but you can also use, like, I think some people call it just regular iced tea. And it is so simple, and you just add the syrup to your water however concentrated you like. The more concentrate you add, of course, the sweeter it'll be, and the more flavorful, the less flavor you'll have. The next thing I'm going to be making today is biscuits, and I do have a biscuit recipe up on my website already, but We actually don't really eat that biscuit recipe anymore, so I found a different way to make biscuits, and I actually started making them this way because my mama, she passed away now, but I was never old enough for her to teach me how to make biscuits. So I took a deep dive on the internet and tried figuring out ways to make biscuits that were soft and fluffy, and I found this recipe. So it does start with self-rising flour, and again, that's not something I normally buy. I usually just always buy all-purpose flour, so I will make my own self-rising flour. It is super, super easy. All you do is start with whatever all-purpose flour you like. We like to use organic, and you will have to have a sifter to do it. So over a bowl, I just measure out 1 cup of flour, so put that through the sifter, and then add 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Also sift that so that it breaks up all the clumps, and then sift 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So it is super, super easy, and I just take a bag of flour and make it, and then I store it in this jar. But that's how you start, is with self-rising flour. And most recipes that I've seen for this, they use all lard, and I do not have any measurements, just because most recipes online that share this way of making biscuits, they don't share any measurements. It's just by look and feel. But I'm trying to get a measurement recipe up for you guys, and instead of using all lard or Crisco, which most people I think use Crisco, but like I've mentioned before, we do not use like vegetable oil or Crisco in our house just because it is a vegetable base. So we use lard, and I'm not sure if lard just has a more bold flavor than Crisco does. Maybe somebody can tell me in the comments down below if it does or not. But whenever I made it with straight lard, we did not like them. So I cut the recipe, and I actually do half lard and half butter, and then buttermilk. But once I get the recipe nailed down and measurements ready for you guys, then I will have it on the blog, and I will have it linked down below for you guys. But it will not be ready by the time I post this video, so check back in a week or two. I'm sorry, I'm slow about my blog post. They take a lot longer to write and get ready for you guys, but I work on that every single week, and I do put up a new post every single week. So just check my blog frequently, because even if I don't share a recipe in my YouTube videos, sometimes I do share those just to the blog. Learning how to cook and just starting to learn to cook from scratch and stuff, I started doing that probably about whenever I was 19 years old, and I'm 25 now, so I know I'm still pretty young compared to most people that are in the homesteading community and stuff. But I think one of the most important skills that somebody can just learn or teach themselves is how to just take a recipe and take out and find alternatives for what, if you have dietary restrictions, just take out what you cannot eat and substitute it for what you can, and how to just convert that recipe into what you need it to be. So as long as you have a base, like my pizza crust recipe and my bread recipe, they are almost the exact same, and all it is like one ingredient different. So that is like, as long as you have a base for a dough recipe, you can make almost every single thing that you could ever imagine under the sun. And that's why I think it's so important to start with like a bread, just because once you master that, it opens up the door to so much more. And the same with like biscuits. If you don't like biscuits, like the same that most people use Crisco, as long as you like swap out the lard, but then the lard didn't work, so just swap it out for another fat. And in my case, I decided to use butter. But I just think that is so important, because it has truly opened up my cooking abilities and just the way that I can create recipes. And I know not everyone wants to create recipes for a job like I do, but even if you don't, then I just think it's such an important skill to have, to not have to rely on a cookbook. This cake is so easy to make, and I did not have even the piping bags or the cake smoothing, the icing smoother, whatever it's called. I didn't have any of that until probably like 4 months ago, but I started making like birthday cakes and stuff just for people in our family, so I did end up buying that stuff just to make it a little bit easier. But you do not need any special tools to make this cake. You don't even have to have an icing tip or anything like that. You can just put your icing in a Ziploc bag and cut the tip off and pipe it on that way. And I know I probably go about this so backwards, but it just is what makes sense in my mind. And I have a cake turntable, but I didn't even use it in this video, so that's how much I did not care about how this cake looked. But I did end up taking pictures and putting it on my blog, so it may not have been that picture worthy, but I have made other better ones in the past. But I was just trying to hurry up and get this done today, and Ben really never cares how they look. He just cares how they taste. But I do love this cake recipe just because it is enough. It's an 8-inch cake and it makes 2, and then I just always stack them on top, and it's enough to last him all week for lunch. And he doesn't eat this for lunch, he packs it as a snack with his lunch, and it lasts him all week and then sometimes into the weekend also. But it just makes it so easy because every single night and evening whenever I go to pack his lunch, I'm not having to think of what can I make him today, what can I make him tomorrow, you know. It just simplifies it and makes it so much faster, and he doesn't have to worry about stopping and going out to eat or anything. Just lunch is ready to go and he has a snack with him. And it's the same thing with the biscuits. So sometimes he'll eat breakfast, sometimes he does not eat breakfast. But on the days that he does eat breakfast, then we always have some sausage or something from like the night before, and he'll just make a quick breakfast sandwich out of the biscuits. But also we do use them as our dinner sides. So sometimes whenever I make dinner, I will just have the biscuits on the side with a side. So it just makes it easy and quick, because on those nights we usually do some kind of meat and then a vegetable and then the biscuit. So that way we're just all around getting a complete meal, and I didn't have to spend the time making the biscuits, flattening out the dough, and then cutting it out and baking it, because all those things do take time. So I do like to meal prep when I can, and I'm not even sure it's considered meal prepping. I think it may just be like working ahead. I really don't know, but it makes life easier. I love having the dining room done now just because I have an extra space where I can set up my backdrop for food photography, and I can take it all in the dining room and just set it up on the table and easily take pictures that way. It's made it so much easier. And if you didn't know this about me, I truly love food photography and just animal, like livestock photography, more than anything. So those are like, I feel like my true passions, like just food photography and livestock photography. But I'm not very good at it. I'm learning, but I don't know, I just find such peace and joy whenever I do it. So those are probably my favorite things. So even if I ever quit posting on Instagram or YouTube, I would still probably do that and still post on the blog just so I could share my pictures there. After spending all day in the kitchen, I had finally looked at all of this long enough, so I put the dishes away. And as you can see here, the caulking around this window has started to crack, and all caulking usually does this. It's either because you didn't put enough or because of the elements where it goes from hot and cold and the moisture and humidity in your house. So ours is definitely because of the moisture and the humidity. During the wintertime, this house is so dry, like we have to run a humidifier. But then in the summertime, it is so wet in this house, like we have to run a dehumidifier. So we're hoping that whenever we install a new HVAC system, it will take care of that, but that'll be at least a couple of years down the road before we're able to do that. So for now, I just am re-caulking all of this because I don't want to cause any moisture problems, especially where this is on the backsplash of the faucet. So I like to take care of it, but it had been like this for several months now, and I just really needed to get it done. While I was waiting on the caulking to dry, I had 30 minutes to wait, so this sink needed a deep scrub. So I'm using Barkeeper's Friend, and I do wear gloves whenever I do this just because it will eat the skin off your hands if you don't. I have messed up before and done that, and your hands will peel for about a week, and it's not fun. So I do wear gloves whenever I do this, and I try not to even do this very often. As you can see, it has not been done in quite some time. But I like to wet the sink down completely first and get a little bit of moisture, and then sprinkle the Barkeepers on, and it'll make a paste. And then I use a rag to just gently scrub it, and I'll usually scrub it for a couple minutes. And Make sure you rinse it very, very good, because that is probably the most important thing, is making sure that you get all the barkeepers off. But it works so well, and whenever I'm done, I'll show a clip. But the sink looked so good, and I do try and keep the sink pretty well in good condition, just because it is Ben's great-grandparents' sink. And if you don't know the story, we ended up finding it whenever we were riding four-wheelers on his papa's property, and we saw it, and he said that it was his parents' sink, and we dug it out of the creek, and he said that I could have it. So we did put it in this house, and it's the perfect addition to our kitchen. I absolutely love it. After the caulking was dry, I did go in with the paint, and I painted over all of the caulking that I had just done, and it just gave new life to back here behind the sink. It looks so refreshed, and I was kind of mad that I waited so long to do it, just because it didn't take me that long at all, maybe just like an hour or two. But it does look better, and now I don't have to worry about water getting back there and causing any problems. Here you can see that I went way too fast, but there is no cracking anymore. And for dinner, we just went with something super simple. We just ate salads for dinner. And the way that we always end our night is usually by washing the eggs. We have so many eggs. Our hens have never stopped laying this year. Usually they slow down, at least during the winter, and we may have gotten 1 or 2 less eggs, but now they are picking back up and laying more than ever. So we are getting tons of eggs every single day. So we do sell some of our eggs. So all of the eggs that we wash, we do sell. So that's why I do wash them, is because nobody wants to buy the eggs if they have hay, poop, or anything like that on them. People just won't buy them. So we do wash them and put them in the fridge, but our eggs that we use ourselves, they'll usually sit out on the counter. But that is going to be it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys will like and subscribe.